On the surface, Jennifer Gledhill's life looked enviable. The neighbors on Maplewood Lane often commented on how lucky she was: a spacious two-story home with a neat garden, a devoted husband, and 2 healthy children who played in the driveway after school. To anyone passing by, the Gledhills embodied stability and warmth, a picture-perfect suburban family. Jennifer herself leaned into this performance. At gatherings, she smiled easily, laughed at jokes, and offered to bring her famous lemon cake. Her friends described her as reliable, the kind of woman you could call at midnight and she'd still pick up. Yet when the crowd dispersed and the house grew quiet, her reflection in the mirror told another story. The smile faded, replaced by a restlessness she could never quite name. David, her husband, adored her in ways that once felt overwhelming. He worked long hours at an accounting firm, determined to give Jennifer the kind of life he believed she deserved. His gestures, fresh flowers on Fridays, a surprise weekend getaway, even his steady presence at the dinner table, were born of love. But in Jennifer's eyes, that devotion began to feel like a cage, its bars invisible but suffocating all the same. Their children, Emily and Noah, filled the house with laughter and chaos. Bedtime routines, school projects, scraped knees, and Saturday soccer games gave Jennifer purpose. Still, she found herself staring out the kitchen window longer than she should, wondering if life was supposed to be more than carpools and carefully folded laundry. Beneath the polished surface lay quiet fractures. David sensed it at times, her distant gaze during conversations, the way she lingered too long on her phone, or the forced enthusiasm in her responses. He brushed these feelings aside, convincing himself she was simply tired. Jennifer, meanwhile, mastered the art of gentle deflection. "I'm fine," she'd say, with a quick smile that ended the discussion before it began. Jennifer's friends admired her dedication. To them, she was a woman who had it all: a stable home, a hard-working husband, and the kind of family others envied. What they didn't see were the late nights when she sat alone in the living room, nursing a glass of wine while staring at the muted television, her mind wandering to places she couldn't put into words. Behind every compliment about her perfect life, Jennifer felt an ache grow sharper. She longed for something undefined: adventure, freedom, passion, or simply to feel seen beyond her roles as wife and mother. That longing became the unspoken emptiness that lived behind her eyes, visible only in fleeting moments when she thought no one was watching. The cracks were small, almost imperceptible, but they were there. And cracks, if left unattended, have a way of widening until they can no longer be ignored. For now, Jennifer kept the performance intact. She laughed at dinner parties, kissed her children goodnight, and played her role as though nothing was missing. But deep inside, she knew the facade could not hold forever. Soon, something, or someone, would ignite the spark that would shatter the illusion of perfection. Jennifer never expected the shift to come on such an ordinary evening. The town's annual charity gala was a polished affair: string lights draped across the community hall, tables adorned with white linens, and the subtle clinking of glasses echoing beneath polite chatter. For Jennifer, it was another obligation, another night of smiling for appearances. She wore her favorite navy dress, the one David always said made her look put together, though tonight she felt anything but. It was during a lull in the speeches that she first noticed him. Michael Turner. He stood near the bar, easy posture, his dark suit tailored sharply to his lean frame. Conversations seemed to orbit around him, his laughter rich, his presence magnetic. Unlike David, who carried himself with restraint, Michael radiated an energy that drew people in effortlessly. Their introduction was almost accidental. Jennifer, reaching for a glass of sparkling water, brushed against him. He turned, offering an amused smile. "Careful," he said lightly. "They might think you're trying to steal the wine." It was a small joke, but it disarmed her. She laughed, genuinely, not the polite kind she'd grown used to offering. Their conversation began with the usual pleasantries. the charity, mutual acquaintances, his recent business expansion in town. Yet beneath the surface of casual words, there was something else. An attentiveness in his gaze, a sharpness that made her feel, for once, not invisible. Michael asked questions no one else did. He wanted to know about her hobbies, her dreams, the books she used to read before life became a cycle of chores and school runs. When she spoke, he listened, truly listened, as though every word mattered. It was intoxicating. For years, Jennifer had felt like a backdrop in her own life, her identity swallowed by her roles. But here, standing beside Michael, she felt like herself again, or at least the version she had once been. As the evening wore on, Jennifer found herself seeking him out in the crowd. Their conversations grew longer, slipping into moments that blurred the edges of time. His compliments came softly, almost imperceptibly, but they lingered in her chest. "You have a way of lighting up when you talk," he said once, and she felt her face flush in a way it hadn't in years. David noticed her absence at the table but said nothing. To him, Jennifer mingling was nothing unusual. To Jennifer, though, the night marked a quiet rebirth. By the time the gala ended, Michael had offered his card. "For the charity," he explained, though his eyes carried an unspoken promise. She slipped it into her purse, heart racing with both guilt and exhilaration. In the days that followed, Jennifer replayed their encounter in her mind. She thought of his questions, his smile, the way he made her feel visible. It began with a single text. Polite, harmless, thank you for the conversation. But soon the messages deepened, laced with subtle flirtation. What started as casual connection threatened to become something more. The emptiness Jennifer once carried now hummed with dangerous possibility. She knew she was stepping onto a path lined with shadows, but the thrill was irresistible. And while Jennifer felt the spark of being alive again, she couldn't see what lay ahead. That every step toward Michael was also a step away from safety. The charity gala was over, but for Jennifer, it had left an ember burning inside her, a restless warmth she couldn't ignore. Michael's card sat tucked in her purse like a secret she was both afraid of and unwilling to part with. She thought about it all day, the feel of his gaze, the sound of his laughter. By the third evening, she gave in. Her fingers hovered over her phone, then typed a simple message. "Thank you again for the conversation the other night." Michael's reply came almost instantly. "The pleasure was mine. You made the night less dull." What followed was harmless, or at least that's what Jennifer told herself. Polite exchanges about the event, the weather, the mundane routines of their lives. Yet even in these safe words there was an undercurrent, an energy that made her heart beat faster each time her phone lit up. Soon, their chats stretched past midnight. With David asleep beside her, Jennifer lay in bed, the glow of the screen lighting her face. She typed quickly, fingers trembling with the thrill of secrecy. Michael was witty, attentive, endlessly curious about her life. He asked about her childhood, her regrets, her dreams left unfulfilled. And she answered, each confession peeling away layers she hadn't revealed to anyone in years. By the second week, the tone shifted. His compliments slipped into the spaces between their confessions. "You deserve more than you're getting. You should be seen the way I see you." Jennifer's stomach flipped at the words. She told herself it was nothing, just kindness wrapped in charm. But when she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror afterward, cheeks flushed and eyes bright, she couldn't deny the truth. His attention was changing her. The guilt arrived quickly, heavy and suffocating. During dinner with David and the children, she forced herself to smile, her phone buzzing silently in her pocket. She would excuse herself to check on the laundry or grab something upstairs, only to sneak another glance at his messages. Every reply carried both exhilaration and shame. Yet the line between safe conversation and dangerous intimacy blurred rapidly. Their words grew charged. He teased her about the dress she had worn at the gala. She teased back, testing the edge of propriety. Soon, the messages turned late-night confessions about loneliness, longing, and the unspoken voids in their lives. Michael didn't just listen. He responded with an understanding that felt intoxicating, almost irresistible. One night, his text lingered longer than the rest. "If things were different, Jennifer, I'd show you what it feels like to be truly wanted." She stared at it for what felt like hours, her pulse racing. Finally, her fingers moved of their own accord. "And if things were different, maybe I'd let you." She dropped the phone onto her nightstand as if it had burned her. David stirred beside her, and for a moment, panic surged. But he only shifted in his sleep, unaware of the storm unfolding inches away. Jennifer lay awake, her heart pounding with both dread and desire. The spark had crossed into flame. She knew it, even if she refused to name it. What began as harmless conversation had become something else, something she couldn't take back. And though she couldn't see it yet, every word exchanged was tightening a web of consequences that would one day leave blood on the floor. Jennifer had crossed the threshold. What began with playful texts had transformed into something far more dangerous. The first time they met outside the glow of their screens, it was under the pretense of coffee, a crowded cafe on the edge of town, far from familiar faces. She told herself it was harmless, two adults catching up. But when Michael leaned across the table, his hand brushing hers with casual ease, she felt her defenses dissolve. Their second meeting was not so innocent. Michael suggested a hotel, his tone light, as if offering a simple suggestion. Jennifer's heart pounded as she typed her agreement, her hands trembling so much she had to delete and retype the message twice. The room was bland, beige walls and stale air freshener. But the moment she closed the door behind her, the atmosphere changed. The weight of her choices crashed down, yet so did the hunger that had been building for weeks. His kiss silenced her doubts, his hands pulling her into a world she thought she had left behind in her youth. Desire surged, hot and consuming, and for those stolen hours, she was no longer a mother, no longer a wife. Just a woman rediscovering a part of herself she had buried. That one meeting became two, then three. A pattern formed, dangerously rehearsed. Jennifer told David she was volunteering longer hours at the community center, or that she had errands across town. She became skilled at fabricating reasons, the lies slipping off her tongue smoother each time. Every rendezvous was a blur of intensity. She and Michael laughed between whispered touches, half drunk on the thrill of secrecy. He promised her the world in those dimly lit rooms, convincing her she was special, chosen. And Jennifer clung to his words, though the fear of being caught gnawed at the edges of her euphoria. At home, the cracks widened. David noticed her distance, her distracted eyes at Dinny. Her phone clutched too tightly when it buzzed. Jennifer brushed it off with tired excuses, blaming stress, headaches, or the endless list of chores. Yet, every lie left a residue of guilt that clung to her, thickening by the day. The children, too, began to sense the shift. "Mom, you're always busy," her daughter murmured one night as Jennifer hurried past her room with an unread bedtime story still on the nightstand. Jennifer froze at the door, guilt searing her chest, before forcing a smile and muttering, "Tomorrow, sweetheart." But she knew tomorrow would bring another excuse. Paranoia crept into her life like a shadow she couldn't shake. At the grocery store, she thought she saw one of her neighbors watching her too closely. At the gym, she flinched when a friend asked casually, "Where have you been lately?" Even at home, when David asked about her day, her pulse spiked, terrified that somehow he already knew. Still, the addiction to Michael grew. The risk seemed to heighten the desire, making every stolen moment sharper, more intoxicating. But at night, Lying in bed while David's steady breathing filled the room, Jennifer's mind swirled with dread. She pictured whispers spreading through the neighborhood, David's face crumbling in betrayal, her children looking at her with eyes full of shame. The double life was unsustainable, and deep down she knew it. Yet she couldn't stop. Each meeting pulled her deeper, further from the woman she once was and closer to the edge of something irreversible. She told herself they were careful, that no one suspected. But already the lies were weaving into something larger, something she could no longer fully control. And in the silence after Michael left one afternoon, Jennifer caught her reflection in the hotel mirror. The woman staring back looked unfamiliar, flushed, exhilarated, yet haunted. For the first time, she wondered, not just if they would be caught, but when. David Gledhill was not a man prone to paranoia. He had built his life on structure, stability, and trust, and for years Jennifer had been the cornerstone of that foundation. But lately, something had shifted. The warmth that once colored her smile had cooled, her gaze often lingering somewhere beyond him, as though tethered to a world he couldn't reach. It began subtly. Jennifer's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now clutched in her hand or tucked away in her bag. When it buzzed, she'd tilt the screen just out of his sight, her face lit by a glow that seemed too bright for just a friend. David tried to dismiss the gnawing unease. Everyone had stress. Maybe it was the endless cycle of parenting, housework, and social obligations. He told himself it was nothing more than fatigue, the same invisible pressure that weighed on them both. Yet, late at night, when he rolled over and found her still awake, staring blankly at the ceiling, his heart whispered otherwise. The distance between them grew. Dinner conversations thinned into silence. Jennifer's laughter, once quick and effortless, had become rare, replaced by distracted nods and perfunctory replies. David reached for her hand one evening at the table, but she pulled away, claiming she needed to grab her phone. The rejection stung deeper than he admitted. Arguments began to surface, sharp and uncharacteristic. "You're never here anymore," he snapped one night after she returned home far later than usual. "I told you I had errands," she replied, her tone tight, defensive. "Jennifer, you're not the same. You're somewhere else." Her voice trembled, equal parts guilt and irritation. "I'm just tired, David. That's all." But he wasn't convinced. Quietly, almost instinctively, David began to take note of her inconsistencies. At first it was mental. The times she left without clear explanation, the excuse, says that sounded rehearsed. Soon he began writing them down in a small leather-bound journal he kept tucked in his desk drawer. Each entry was a snapshot of suspicion. Thursday, home late again, smelled of perfume not her usual. Saturday, said she was volunteering, but kids said she never left until later. The act of journaling gave him both clarity and dread. He didn't want to believe his wife was capable of betrayal, yet the growing collection of red flags pointed towards something he could no longer ignore. Jennifer, meanwhile, felt the weight of his eyes on her. Every question, every silence at the dinner table carried a charge of suspicion. She tried to cover it with smiles, excuses, reassurances, but her performance faltered under the strain, and in the quiet moments alone, she could almost feel the walls of her double life closing in. One evening, David caught her staring at her reflection in the hallway mirror, her face pale and weary. He approached gently. "Jen," he whispered, "if there's something wrong, please tell me." Her lips parted, as though she might confess everything in that single moment. But then her phone buzzed in her hand, Michael's name lighting up the screen. She turned away, forcing a laugh. "It's nothing, really." David nodded, but inside a darker certainty took root. The cracks in their marriage were no longer invisible. They were jagged, spreading, and he knew if he didn't uncover the truth soon, the entire foundation of their life together would collapse. And so, silently, patiently, David resolved to keep watching. He would gather proof. He would be ready. The pages of David's journal had grown crowded with suspicion, each entry bleeding into the next until it no longer felt like notes, but a story writing itself. A story he dreaded to finish. His once quiet doubts had hardened into grim determination. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. One chilly evening, when Jennifer announced she had an extended meeting, David felt the old ache of mistrust rise in his chest. He nodded, feigning acceptance, but as soon as the door clicked shut behind her, he grabbed his keys and followed. His heart pounded like a drum, every stoplight stretching the suspense, every turn tightening the knot in his stomach. Jennifer's car finally slowed before a hotel tucked discreetly off the main road. David parked at a distance, his breath fogging the windshield. He watched as she stepped out, her scarf pulled high against the cold, her body tense with purpose. She glanced around, as though wary of eyes that might see. Then, like a dagger plunging into his chest, Michael appeared. Their movements were quick, familiar. Without hesitation, she followed him inside. For a long time, David couldn't move. His palms gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched, his mind a storm of images. Her smile at their wedding, her laugh in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around their children. All of it now twisted, corrupted by the sight of her walking willingly into another man's embrace. The rage came suddenly, hot and unrelenting, burning through the hollow ache in his chest. Betrayal had a taste, metallic and bitter, and it coated his tongue as he sat there trembling. He wanted to storm inside, to drag her out into the cold night and demand why. But another part of him, a quieter, darker part, kept him still. He needed to know more. He needed her to face the truth, not hide behind excuses. Hours later, when Jennifer returned home, David was waiting. He sat in the living room, the lamp casting shadows across his face. She froze at the doorway, her eyes flicking to his expression, gauging how much he knew. "You're late," he said, his voice low, steady. "I told you," she replied quickly, shrugging off her coat. "The meeting ran long." David leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "At a hotel?" The air snapped between them. Jennifer's face paled, then hardened into something practiced. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw enough." His voice cracked, raw with pain. "Don't lie to me, Jennifer." She swallowed, searching for words. "It's not what you think." The phrase struck him like mockery. He let out a hollow laugh. "Then tell me, what is it? Because from where I was standing, it looked like my wife walking into a hotel with another man." Her eyes welled, though whether with guilt or strategy, he couldn't tell. "Michael's just a friend, someone I can talk to. You don't understand how lonely I've felt." David rose to his feet, the tremor in his body barely contained. "Lonely? You had me. You had us. And this is how you fill the void?" Jennifer turned away, her voice dropping. "You wouldn't understand. You've stopped seeing me. He makes me feel alive." The words gutted him, more than any denial could have. He stood there, staring at the woman he thought he knew, his chest tight with grief and fury. Silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. Finally, Jennifer whispered, "Please, David, don't make this worse than it already is." He wanted to scream, to shatter the walls with his anguish, but instead he walked past her, each step heavy with restraint. Upstairs, he shut the bedroom door behind him, his heart pounding, his mind unraveling. In the stillness of the night, David opened his journal once more. His pen hovered, then pressed into the page with force. The entry was short. "Jag Galbarosson." Then I saw it. No more doubts. She's gone. And yet, beneath the ink and the rage, something darker simmered, an unspoken question about what he would do next. The house was eerily quiet. the kind of silence that hummed in David's ears and made his skin itch. Days had passed since the hotel confrontation, but the storm inside him had only grown darker. Jennifer moved about the house with calculated calm, as though pretending life was normal might stitch their marriage back together. But every time David looked at her, the image of her slipping into that hotel with Michael resurfaced, shredding whatever fragile piece he tried to summon. That night, as rain battered the windows, David sat alone in the dim glow of his desk lamp, his journal open before him. His hands trembled as he scrolled through Jennifer's phone, a phone she had carelessly left unlocked on the kitchen counter. His chest constricted as words filled the screen. Last night was perfect. I can still feel you. Another. When can I see you again? I need you. Each message was a blade, slicing through the last thread of restraint. His jaw clenched. His breath grew ragged. The confirmation he thought he already had now burned into him like fire, undeniable and raw. Jennifer entered the study moments later, her hair damp from the shower, wearing a soft robe cinched loosely around her waist. She froze when she saw her phone in his hands, her eyes widening before narrowing with something between fear and defiance. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. David stood, his face pale but his eyes ablaze. "How long, Jennifer? How long have you been giving yourself to him?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She tried to compose herself, to control the narrative, but her silence betrayed her. "You could have ended this," David pressed, stepping closer, his voice cracking under the weight of his anguish. "You could have told me the truth. Instead, you kept lying, kept feeding me scraps while you gave him everything." Jennifer's composure broke, her voice rising. "Because you stopped being there for me. Do you even see me anymore? With Michael, I felt alive, something you haven't made me feel in years." The words detonated in the room, sharp and merciless. David staggered back, clutching the edge of the desk as if to steady himself against the blow. His chest heaved, his pulse roaring in his ears. "You loved him?" His voice was hollow, barely audible. "I don't know what it was," she shot back, her own tears brimming. "But it was real. More real than this. This charade of a marriage we've been pretending to hold together." The crack of thunder outside seemed to echo the fracture inside David. His grief curdled into something uncontrollable, something primal. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the arms. "Don't you dare call our life a charade!" he roared, shaking her. Jennifer struggled, panic flashing in her eyes. "Let go of me, David! You're hurting me!" But the words barely registered. His vision tunneled, red and suffocating. Years of love, trust, and family collapsed under the weight of betrayal. In a blur of rage, he shoved her hard against the wall. Her head struck the plaster with a dull thud. She gasped, disoriented, her hand instinctively reaching up. David's chest tightened, horror flickering for a split second. But then came another wave of anger, stronger, darker. His fists clenched. He struck her once, twice, each blow fueled not by reason but by the blinding madness of humiliation. Jennifer screamed, her voice slicing through the house, but the rain outside and the storm within drowned it out. She clawed at him, trying to push him away, but her strength faltered against his fury. The struggle spilled into the living room. A lamp toppled, shattering, scattering shards across the carpet. Blood smeared against the wall where she fell, her robe tearing at the shoulder. "Please, David." "I choke her." He choked out, her voice weak, trembling. "Think of the children." But the plea only twisted the knife deeper. The storm outside still raged, but inside the Gledhill home, an even darker storm lingered. David sat slumped against the wall, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the lifeless body sprawled across the floor. Jennifer's robe had fallen open slightly, revealing the bruises on her arms and the unnatural stillness of her chest. Her once vibrant eyes were now glassy, frozen in terror. The silence pressed down on him, suffocating. It was louder than her last scream, louder than the thunder rolling across the night sky. He pressed his hands to his ears as if he could block it out, but there was no escape from the weight of it. Upstairs, the soft creak of floorboards reminded him the children were asleep, their innocence still intact, their world unshattered. For now. He imagined their tiny footsteps padding down the stairs in the morning, their sleepy faces lighting up with questions. "Where's Mom?" The thought made his stomach churn. David buried his face in his hands, rocking slightly. His body trembled with the aftershocks of rage, now replaced by something far worse. Realization. He whispered to himself in fragments. No, this isn't real. She's just sleeping. She has to be. But when he lifted his head again, the truth remained unflinching. Blood streaked across the carpet. Her lips, once quick to argue or laugh, were parted in eternal silence. Denial crumbled into horror. His chest tightened, and tears spilled down his cheeks as a raw sob escaped his throat. He crawled closer to her, brushing the strands of hair from her face with shaking fingers. Her skin was already growing cold. "I didn't mean it, Jen. I swear I didn't mean it," he muttered, his voice breaking. "You pushed me too far, but I—" His words dissolved into a guttural cry. The clock ticked on the wall, steady and merciless. Each second felt like a hammer striking, counting down to a reckoning he called it. Couldn't avoid. He thought of calling the police, of confessing, of crumbling at their feet. But another thought crept in, poisonous and tempting. Escape. If he left now, if he drove far enough, maybe he could rewrite the story. He could vanish before anyone asked questions. But then his gaze drifted back upstairs. The children, his children. Could he abandon them? Leave them to grow up with the shadow of this night? The idea tore him in two. His mind fractured, ping-ponging between possibilities. He stood abruptly, pacing, clutching his head as if to squeeze the chaos out. Shadows from the broken lamp stretched grotesquely across the walls, making the house feel like a stranger's home. He opened the front door once, the cold rain splattering against his face. Freedom was just a step away, the night wide and open. But the weight of his soaked shirt, the blood drying on his hands, and the image of Jennifer's still body dragged him back inside. Closing the door, he leaned against it, chest heaving. I can't run. Not yet," he whispered. His eyes darted back to the living room. He thought of moving her body, of hiding it, but the very idea felt grotesque. Nothing could erase the scene carved into the walls and floors. The silence returned, oppressive, gnawing at him. He wanted her to scream again, even if in anger, just so he could believe she was still alive. But there was nothing, only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of thunder. David sank back to the floor beside her, his body folding in on itself. He pressed his forehead to his knees, rocking like a child, the silence of the house echoing louder with every passing moment. Upstairs, one of the children stirred in their sleep, a faint whimper breaking through the quiet. David's head jerked upward. Panic surged. The illusion of time had run out. The morning would come, and with it, questions no silence could answer. And outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened, unaware that inside this house, everything had changed forever. The silence in the Gledhill home didn't last long. By dawn, the storm had passed, and the neighborhood seemed washed clean. But inside, the horror remained untouched. A neighbor, unsettled by the shouting and crashing from the previous night, finally placed a call to the police. Within minutes, flashing blue and red lights bathed the quiet suburban street. Officers moved swiftly, their footsteps crunching against rain-soaked gravel as they approached the front door. The moment they stepped inside, the stench of blood and the oppressive silence told them enough. Jennifer lay on the living room floor, her lifeless body framed by shadows. David was still there, slumped nearby, staring blankly, as though frozen in a waking nightmare. The officers' voices were sharp, professional, but edged with unease as they handcuffed him. He didn't resist. He simply lowered his head, his hands trembling as the metal cuffs clicked shut. Detective Harris, a seasoned investigator with tired eyes, arrived soon after. He surveyed the scene with practiced detachment, but there was a flicker of something human beneath the surface, a recognition of the tragedy that had unfolded here. The children were quickly escorted from their bedrooms, still groggy and confused, shielded from the sight of their mother. The crime scene unit photographed every angle, the blood-smeared walls, the overturned lamp, the scattered shards of a broken glass. Each detail became a piece of a puzzle that, at first glance, seemed tragically clear. Yet Harris knew appearances could deceive. Down at the station, David sat in an interrogation room, his shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. He spoke in fragments, muttering about betrayal, humiliation, and rage.
She lied to me. Over and over. I just snapped,
he whispered. His words were both confession and cry for mercy, an explanation that felt more like self-condemnation. Meanwhile, investigators combed through Jennifer's phone. Dozens of messages with Michael Turner painted a portrait of longing and secrecy, late-night texts, playful flirtations, and explicit exchanges that left little doubt about the affair. Harris read them carefully, each word tightening the noose of motive around David's neck. Security footage from a hotel confirmed Jennifer's clandestine meetings. Clerks remembered her, though she had used different excuses each time. Business trips, visiting a sick relative. One witness recalled David lingering outside the hotel weeks before, his expression unreadable, perhaps already suspecting the truth. Neighbors were questioned, and their accounts added weight to the unfolding narrative. "We heard yelling," one said. "It wasn't the first time, but last night, it sounded worse." Another neighbor admitted seeing Jennifer stepping into Michael's car on more than one occasion. The whispers of a failing marriage had long lingered, but no one had expected the storm to break like this. Detectives pieced the timeline together. A woman torn between the comfort of stability and the thrill of passion, a husband consumed by suspicion, and a final night where secrets erupted into violence. The affair wasn't just a backdrop, it was the fault line that had split the family apart. Yet Harris found himself unsettled. The crime scene was messy, brutal, the result of uncontrolled fury, not careful planning. David's tears seemed genuine, his devastation raw. He wasn't a cold-blooded killer in the traditional sense, but that distinction offered no comfort to Jennifer, whose life had been extinguished, nor to the children, whose futures would be forever scarred. The media soon descended, hungry for a headline. "Suburban mother murdered by husband," the papers cried. Jennifer was cast as both victim and betrayer, her secret life exposed for the world to dissect. David, meanwhile, was portrayed as the monstrous husband, a man whose love had curdled into violence. Harris knew the case was straightforward in legal terms: motive, opportunity, confession. But emotionally, it was anything but simple. Behind the black and white of the law lived a story drenched in gray: betrayal, desperation, and the thin line between heartbreak and homicide. By the end of the week, charges were formally filed: second-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming, but the defense was already preparing a case built on passion, not premeditation. The stage was set for a trial that would expose every private wound to public scrutiny. As Harris closed his notebook that night, he glanced at the photos of Jennifer pinned on the board: the smiling mother, the woman at the charity gala, the lifeless figure on the living room floor. The contrast was stark, haunting. Justice would now take its course, but Harris couldn't shake the question that lingered like a shadow. Was this tragedy inevitable, or could someone, anyone, have stopped it before it reached this point? The courthouse steps buzzed with cameras and voices long before the trial began. Journalists huddled together, microphones poised, waiting for any soundbite that could frame the story tighter than yesterday's headlines. Jennifer Gledhill's name was already etched into the public's mind, half saint, half sinner. David, in shackles and guarded by deputies, was cast as either a grieving husband who snapped or a calculating murderer who masked brutality with remorse. Inside, the courtroom was thick with tension. Every creak of the wooden benches, every cough from the gallery seemed amplified in the hush. The jury filed in, their expressions neutral masks. They carried the burden of judgment, but their eyes betrayed curiosity, unease, and, in some, sympathy. The prosecution opened first. District Attorney Reynolds rose with a measured calm, pacing before the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you will hear in the coming days is not the story of an accident, nor a man pushed beyond reason. This is the story of choice. Choices made in anger, choices that ended in murder." He pointed toward a photo displayed on the screen, Jennifer's smiling face, frozen in time. Then, another photo, the blood-streaked living room. The contrast was devastating. Witness after witness was called. Neighbors recounted the fights, the shouting on that final night, the sight of Jennifer stepping into another man's car. Forensic experts described the blunt force trauma, the violence that left no room for ambiguity. To the jury, Reynolds painted David not as a broken man, but as a deliberate killer, one who let rage metastasize into lethal action. When it was the defense's turn, Attorney Blake rose, his voice heavy with gravity but softened by empathy. "This is not a case about a monster," he began. "This is about a man, a husband, a father, whose heart was torn apart by betrayal. David Gledhill did not plan to kill his wife. He loved her. But love twisted by lies and humiliation can drive even the strongest among us to the edge." The defense's narrative leaned heavily on emotion. They called character witnesses, friends and co-workers who described David as gentle, dependable, a man devoted to his children. Blake highlighted the text messages, not as prelude to murder, but as knives twisting deeper into David's soul, messages that flaunted the intimacy he no longer shared with his wife. The most explosive moment came when Michael Turner was summoned. The courtroom stirred, whispers rippling like a wave as he walked to the stand. His composure was smooth at first, but under questioning cracks appeared. He admitted to the affair, how it began with harmless flirtation, how it escalated into stolen hotel meetings. His words dripped with guilt, but also defensiveness. "Did you ever think," Reynolds kid sharply, "about the risk you put Jennifer in? Did you think about her husband? Her children?" Michael's jaw tightened. "We never meant for it to go this far. We cared about each other." The gallery shifted uneasily, some shaking their heads, others whispering under their breath. For Jennifer's family, seated in the front row, every word was another wound. Blake's cross-examination took a different approach. "Mr. Turner," he pressed, "when you sent those explicit messages to a married woman, did you imagine the effect they would have on her husband if discovered?" Michael hesitated, then lowered his eyes. "No, I didn't think about him." The moment landed heavily. For the defense, it was a small but vital crack in the prosecution's wall, a reminder that David's rage, while brutal, had been provoked by betrayal that few could endure without breaking. Days stretched into weeks, testimony piling upon testimony. The jury was left balancing two competing portraits, a cold-blooded killer versus a man undone by heartbreak. Photographs, phone records, forensic details, all evidence was laid bare, but so too were raw emotions, whispered secrets, and shattered vows. By closing arguments, the courtroom felt less like a hall of law and more like a stage of human tragedy. Reynolds ended with icy precision. Justice demands accountability. Jennifer Gledhill is dead, and the man who killed her sits right there. He pointed at David, whose face was pale and drawn. Blake's final words were softer, almost pleading. Do not mistake pain for premeditation. Do not turn a grieving man into a monster he is not. This was a crime of passion, terrible, irreversible, but not calculated murder. When the jury was dismissed to deliberate, the room exhaled as though it had been holding its breath for weeks. Reporters scribbled frantically, family members clutched each other's hands, and David sat motionless, waiting for strangers to decide the shape of the rest of his life. The trial was over in words, but the verdict had yet to be spoken, and, in that silence, every soul in the courtroom trembled, bracing for what was to come. The air in the courtroom was thick with dread as the jury filed back in. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of inevitability. David sat rigid, his hands clasped together, knuckles white, his lips moving silently in what might have been prayer, or a desperate plea to no one at all. Behind him, Jennifer's family sat in fragile unity, their faces pale, their grief sharpened into something unyielding. All rise, the bailiff announced. Chairs scraped the floor as everyone stood. The jurors' faces revealed nothing, but the weight of their decision pressed on every soul in the room. The foreman rose, a folded slip of paper in hand. We, the jury, find the defendant, David Gledhill, guilty of second-degree murder. The words landed like a hammer. A sharp gasp broke the silence. Jennifer's sister clutched her chest, tears welling. David closed his eyes, his face sagging as if the floor had given way beneath him. For a fleeting moment he seemed smaller, almost childlike, as deputies stepped closer, prepared to escort him away. Sentencing followed swiftly. 25 years in state prison. The judge's voice was steady, but even she could not disguise the sorrow etched into her tone. This is a tragedy on all sides, she said, glancing from the gallery to David. Families are destroyed, children left without a mother and a father. The gavel struck, final and unforgiving. The case was closed, but the shadows it cast lingered long after. In the weeks that followed, the Gledhill home stood as a quiet reminder of what had been lost. Neighbors slowed their steps when passing, whispering about Jennifer's fate, about David's rage, about the affair that had unraveled everything. The once lively yard where children played and laughter echoed now seemed haunted by silence. Jennifer's funeral drew a quota and larger than expected. Friends and acquaintances, some shocked, some secretly judgmental, gathered to pay respects. Eulogies painted her as a loving mother, a woman of warmth and kindness. Few dared mention her secrets, though everyone knew. She was remembered with both tenderness and complication, an angel to some, a cautionary tale to others. For David, prison became his new reality. Letters from his children arrived, their handwriting shaky, their words caught between love and confusion. He read them over and over, tears staining the pages, but answers eluded him. In his cell, nights stretched endlessly, haunted by Jennifer's face. Sometimes smiling, sometimes terrified, always unreachable. Michael Turner, too, bore the scars. He vanished from the public eye, his reputation shredded. Colleagues distanced themselves, whispers followed him wherever he went. Though never charged, his name was bound to the scandal, tethered forever to Jennifer's death. His guilt was a quieter punishment, one without bars, but with no escape. The community wrestled with its own questions. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was David a villain, or a man broken by betrayal? Was Jennifer a victim of violence or of choices that spiraled beyond control? There were no clear answers, only fragments of a shattered story, each observer piecing them together according to their own biases. At night, The Gledhill children lay awake, their world irreparably altered. They had lost both parents in different ways, one buried in the ground, the other locked behind steel. Their future was a question mark, heavy with the echoes of secrets they had been too young to understand. The case faded from headlines in time, replaced by fresher tragedies, but within the community, it lingered. People still lowered their voices when speaking of it, still pointed toward the house with drawn blinds. Jennifer became both a memory and a myth, her name invoked when discussing loyalty, love, and the dangerous currents of desire. And David, whether seen as monster or broken man, remained a reminder of how highly passion can tip into ruin, how fragile the line is between devotion and destruction. In the end, justice had been served, at least in the eyes of the law. But in the lives left behind, justice was far murkier. What remained were shadows, of betrayal, of rage, of secrets that festered until they consumed everything in their path. The camera lingers on an empty street outside the Gledhill home. The blinds are still drawn, the windows dark, the once welcoming porch now a relic of absence. In the voiceover, the narrator's tone is measured, heavy with the gravity of what has unfolded. Jennifer Gledhill's story is not just about infidelity or rage. It is about the silent fractures that form in seemingly perfect lives. It is about the choices we make, the lies we tell, and the damage that can ripple outward, destroying far more than we ever imagined. Jennifer is remembered by many as warm, loving, and accomplished. But the affair revealed another side, longing, vulnerability, and discontent she could not silence. Her life became a complicated portrait of devotion and desire colliding, of a woman caught between duty to her family and the thrill of forbidden passion. David's fall was equally tragic. Once seen as a steady husband and father, he allowed betrayal and humiliation to harden into rage. His crime was brutal, irreversible. For the court, his guilt was clear. For the public, the debate remains. Was he a monster from the start, or a man undone by heartbreak? The documentary weaves together interviews, friends who describe Jennifer's kindness, co-workers who recall her professionalism, neighbors who admit they never saw the storm brewing. You think you know people, one says softly, but you never really know what happens behind closed doors. Another voice, a close friend of David's, trembles as he speaks. He loved her. That's what makes it so hard to understand. Love can protect, but love can also destroy. And in David's case, it destroyed everything. The lessons from this tragedy are stark. Secrets, even those born from loneliness or longing, rarely stay hidden. Lies demand more lies, until truth itself collapses under the weight of deceit. Jennifer believed she could live in both worlds, wife and mother at home, lover in the shadows, but the collision was inevitable. For David, the inability to face betrayal with restraint cost him his freedom and his children's innocence. His rage did not just end a marriage, it ended a life and shattered countless others. The children remain the most haunting consequence. Too young to fully grasp betrayal or passion, they now grow up defined by absence, a mother buried, a father imprisoned, their family name whispered with pity or judgment. Their lives are an ongoing reminder that crimes of passion leave scars that never heal. True crime stories often echo long after the headlines fade. They force uncomfortable questions. Could this have been prevented? What if Jennifer had ended the affair before it escalated? What if David had walked away the night he discovered the truth? Each what if is another door left unopened, another chance forever lost. The camera cuts to a shot of a quiet courtroom, empty now, benches lined but unoccupied. The narrator's voice overlays, "In the end, this was not just about Jennifer or David. It was about how fragile human bonds can be, how easily they can unravel when tested by secrecy, desire, and betrayal." As the music swells, the documentary ends not with answers, but with caution. Jennifer's story is framed as both tragedy and warning, a reminder that beneath smiles, routines, and polished surfaces, unspoken storms may be brewing. And when those storms break, they can consume everything in their path. Her legacy is complicated, her choices controversial, but her story, etched in betrayal, rage, and blood, remains a haunting lesson in the devastating cost of silence, longing, and lies.